Chapter 3. New Squadron. Captain Monroe Drex walked along the pristine concrete sidewalk of Schreiber Air Force Base, as he did every morning, and each time his hatred for the place grew more intense. Not because it was a difficult duty station, but for the dull existence of it all. The yearning to once again spend his days running operations with the 3rd Ranger Battalion would have driven a lesser man insane. Drex felt it unnatural for an Army Ranger to be assigned to an Air Force squadron, feeling so strong that twice a month, since arriving at his new command with the 527th Space Aggressor Squadron, he walked to the personnel office to submit his request for transfer back to 3rd Rangers. Making the request had become futile, but it was one he needed to make, regardless that each submission was merely denied the very next day. Drex knew from years in the military that he was stuck in his current duty station, because at no time in military history had paperwork moved fast enough to receive a reply within 24 hours.
Drex! Hey, wait up!
Just as he approached the administration building, he turned to face a familiar voice, one Drex quickly recognized as the man approached. Jake, he responded, surprised. They had only crossed paths a few times in the 15 years since they completed Ranger training. Spotting the captain bars on Drex's uniform, Jake quickly stopped, went to attention, and rendered a salute.
Captain
Drex returned his salute, stretching out his hand to shake Jake's. He was grateful to shake the hand of another Ranger. Holy shit, man. You went commissioned. Last I heard, you were running operations in Afghanistan. I actually even thought you had eaten the big one there, Jake said with a hint of excitement in his voice, as they shook hands. After a year at Schreiber Air Force Base, Drex thought, probably would have been better than this. Yeah, after I finished officer candidate training, I did another tour overseas. Then I was stationed here. That was all the information he could relay, or even wanted to tell Jake about his current duty station. What am I going to say? Oh, I'm here training personnel to fight space aliens. Drex couldn't even laugh at the thought anymore. So, he quickly turned the conversation back to Jake. So, I see you made Master Sergeant. Congratulations. Jake's chin rose slightly higher, causing him to look taller. The added shit sucks, but it puts that many more people below me in rank. Not as many as the bars on your chest, but still an improvement. Drex couldn't resist his burning curiosity as to why Jake was here any longer, and asked, "What brings you to Schreiber?" Jake's lips puckered, as if he had tasted something sour. "I had better check in and get to where I need to be, sir. This is personnel?" he asked, pointing to the building nearest them. "Yes," Drex replied, recognizing the deflection for what it was, and understanding that their conversation was over. He turned slightly and reached out to the door for personnel administration. "Get a beer later in town?" Stopping just inside the door with a crooked smirk on his face, Jake answered, "Now, sir, you know enlisted and officers can't drink together. But if you have a suggestion on where to get a beer, and the best time to drink it, I'm listening." 1900 The Cave. "Sounds good. I'll check it out. Thanks for the suggestion, sir." Jake nodded his head slightly as he continued into the building. As he watched the Ranger walk down the hallway, Drex's mind buzzed with curiosity. What was Jake here for? He watched as Jake passed the door to personnel and continued to enter operations. Drex looked down to his hand at his latest request form. This rejection can wait another day. Then he turned facing back the way he had come, feeling pretty good that they would meet again soon. Even sooner than 1900 hours. A few hours later, Drex stood watching his squad negotiate an obstacle course designed specifically for them. The course looked much like any other, with the exception of an underground portion that held a wide range of obstacles meant to challenge the mind and body. Many of the obstacles were far beyond his technical capabilities, but Drex understood his role was that of combat logistics. He stood stoically behind glass in the observation room, watching as his squad attempted to disarm a fictional weapon before it could strike them with an electrical pulse. On this obstacle, they experienced electrical shocks lasting 3 seconds every 2 minutes after the first failed attempt. Having run the obstacle with his squad many times, he knew just how intense the shocks were. On the occasions Drex accompanied his squad, he felt sure that his squad intentionally waited to disarm devices till after the first shock, allowing themselves to be shocked just so he was as well. They almost always succeeded before the first shock when running obstacles alone. "Enter!" Drex called out to whoever had knocked on the door, while keeping his focus on his squad. Stepping in the room, Sergeant Spears went to attention. Her eyes shifted from Drex to those negotiating the course before stating, "Sir, they request your squad in briefing room C." Drex had felt the day would be different since his earlier encounter with Jake, and with no briefings previously scheduled for today, his suspicions were proven correct. "Be there in 5 mics." Spears cringed as she watched the clock next to Drex ticking down closer to 0, knowing that a shock of electricity was near. Spears' body tensed, even though it wasn't her that would receive the shock. 7, 6, 5, 4. The squad completed their task with 3 seconds to spare, signaled by a buzzer sound simultaneously opening a door for their next task. "I knew they were doing it on purpose," Drex mumbled. "What was that, sir?" Spears asked, a little disappointed she didn't get to see the squad become electrified. Drex dismissed her question with a wave of his hand and pressed a button on the control panel just in front of him. The corridor his squad was now located in lit up brightly, signaling to them that this training session was at an end. With his squad's attention now on the observation room glass, Drex pressed another button and said, "Briefing room C, 5 mics." Drex knew these were probably some of the best and smartest soldiers he had ever seen. Even that didn't take away how strange all of it was to be an Army Ranger in command of an Air Force squad. A squad containing personnel from 4 branches of the armed services. "Oh yeah, I forgot we are training to fight ET." He finished the thought with a brief smirk. Seeing his squad had exited the lower training center, he turned to find Spears staring at the weapon his squad had just disarmed. It was easy to see that something bothered her, and his curiosity always needed to be fed. "What is it, Sergeant?" Hesitantly, she replied, "Sir, I know it's not my place, but they should have been shocked." Drex wondered how she could tell anything from this distance, especially when circuit boards had such small components, and figured there could only be one explanation. "Did you help design the test, Sergeant?" "No, sir. Those come from an unknown department. I am just great with patterns and connections. Those they made should not have worked, sir."
The enemy follows predictable
This time,
patterns,
Spears
here and
spoke
here.
with more confidence
We disrupt
when
their connection
explaining
by
her
flanking through these
observation.
lines.
After a
This
brief
creates the
explanation
openings
and
we need.
description of her observations, for which Drex had little understanding, he was impressed. It was something that would need to be followed up on. He asked, "I don't remember seeing your name on the unit candidates list for this squad. Why didn't you try out?" Spears looked to the floor as she spoke. "Sir, you know in the Army, your physical fitness score might as well be your IQ. I was disqualified for not maxing out the push-up section, sir." He knew just what Spears was talking about. It did not matter what you wanted to do in the Army. You had better have a 300 PFT score, or others that would receive the spot. He felt that the practice was not a fair way to evaluate everyone, but it was an issue for another time. Glancing down at his watch, he quickly realized more time had passed during their short conversation than he had expected. Without replying to Spears' explanation of why she didn't try out for the squad, he started walking. "Let's move, Sergeant." For most of the walk to briefing room C, Drex thought about his conversation with Spears, but the closer they got to their destination, the more his thoughts switched to Jake. After running into him this morning, he felt they would cross paths again before the end of the duty day, and this unscheduled briefing was most likely the spot. His hunch was confirmed the second he walked in. He spotted Jake moving toward him with a grin upon his face. Only this time, he was wearing eagles on his uniform instead of sergeant stripes. "Captain, good to see you here. I figured it would be the case when I sighted a fellow ranger on an Air Force base," Jake said as he neared. "Full bird, Colonel," Drex replied, letting that and his expression stand for multiple questions he wanted to ask. Jake knew exactly what was going through Drex's mind and attempted to quickly answer what he believed would be the biggest question, his current rank. "Been an officer from the start. My cover is enlisted, as you knew me before today. I'll cover the rest later." Jake spotted the last of Alpha Squad entering the room. "Looks like everyone is here, so let's get started." Jake turned back to the front of the room. Drex thought back to when he first met Jake as a young E4 specialist in ranger training at Fort Benning, Georgia, and all the times their paths crossed since. Not once did it seem there was anything out of the ordinary about him, and that brought up many more questions that would have to wait. But for now, Drex wondered what new training scenarios they would introduce him and his team to, or if it was to be another theory of how they might be attacked by ET. It didn't really matter because he knew it wouldn't be any different from all the others during his 14 months as command of Alpha Squad. The second he heard Jake speak, boredom began to take hold, knowing how most of these sessions begin with the qualifications and background of the speaker. However, with the current revelation about Jake, Drex thought it would be great to hear what background he would share. "Hello, everyone. I am Colonel Jake Guerrero with the 75th Ranger Regiment, 2nd Battalion. We will forgo the meet and greet portion today and move right into why I am here. From what I understand, this will be Alpha Squad's first official mission." Drex felt his body tighten, eyes widen, and ears perk up with the words, "first official mission." This wasn't the same crap as before. Drex felt the excitement take hold of him, just hoping for anything other than training. "I'm afraid there is not a great deal of information about what you can expect, but here is what we know. In January of last year, satellites recorded high energy levels coming from a remote mountainous region of Afghanistan. That following March, 8 recon Marines were sent to investigate the threat factor. We lost contact with them a full day before they were to arrive at the energy location." "What about satellite tracking?" someone from the middle of the room asked. "Ineffective. Please hold all questions to the end," Jake stated, with a look that made it clear that there would be no further interruptions. Satisfied he had made himself clear, he continued the briefing. "A few days later, we sent a SEAL team to investigate. They brought this back." He nodded to a soldier standing by the light switch, and shortly after, a video was projected on the wall behind where Jake had been standing. Drex watched intensely as he assumed the Marines walking in the video were those sent to investigate. The first few minutes of the video looked like most from the Afghan region, with a line of soldiers walking up a rocky mountain. Then it showed the radio man unsuccessfully reporting to command. It was clear from what he could see in the video that there was nothing wrong with the equipment. It was just not sending or receiving signals, not even static. The mission was well documented, even though the radio signals seemed to be botched. As he watched, the Marines located a small hole in the mountainside that was where the energy source seemed to be strongest. Drex watched as the soldiers placed explosive charges around the hole, still not seeing any possible mission for his squad. The video shifted from the charge being placed to seconds after detonation. The first thing that caught his attention, and apparently everyone else's, was that of the bluish glow as dust floated in front of the opening created. Everyone was focused on the entrance, as the video was sped up to a point where the dust had settled seconds before the Marines began their investigation. Drex could feel himself squinting and leaning forward, as if it would allow him to see inside the cave a second sooner. For the first time since he had arrived at Schriever Air Force Base, he felt excitement watching the camera peer into the cave. It showed nothing but rock. All the excitement that had been building crashed back down to earth, and he leaned back in his seat, disappointed. A few more minutes passed as one Marine then another entered, moving farther into the darkness with a few squiggle frames flashing before the video ended. Really? Drex thought. The only interesting thing about that video was a slight blue tint to some dust. The video ended, and the lights turned on. Jake studied the faces in front of him, most of whom looked as though they had just watched a bad commercial. Questions? Drex raised his hand. What happened to the Marines? Drex's first concern was always the safety of his soldiers. Jake looked to his fellow ranger before replying. Their whereabouts are unknown at this time. We recovered the video at the cave entrance. After giving his answer to Drex's question, seconds passed as no further hands went up. Okay, if there are no further questions, we will... I have one, Sergeant Spears said from the back of the room. Since she was with support and not a squad member, she was unsure if it was okay to ask a question, but couldn't resist. Jake looked in her direction. Yes? Spears hesitated slightly, then asked.
The last image in the video, was that a person in the glass?
After hearing her question, everyone looked to her as if she had not watched the same thing they had, except for one.
What is your name?
Sergeant Spears.
Well, Sergeant, not sure how you were able to notice what nobody else could until they enhanced the video and slowed it down. But you are correct. The last second of the video contained 30 minutes of footage. Jake had to stop and let the room settle down before continuing. The footage will only be provided in the team's security room. However, for now, here are some slides. With each one he presented to the room came awe and fascination, but no more so than when the image of a human-like creature encased in a blue shield appeared. Drex's excitement returned and magnified with each slide. It might not be combat, but this is some cool shit, he thought. He wanted to get his hands on the recovered video. The briefing carried on for another 10 minutes as mission excitement grew. He just could not wait to get dirt on his boots that wasn't from training. He heard Jake say, Alpha Squad report to your team security room at 1100 hours. That is all. Drex knew there was only one thing to do before leaving the room. Standing up and turning, he spotted the person he was looking for and headed over.
Alpha Squad report to your team security room at 1100 hours, that is all. Push-ups can't help people see what you do. Report to team room 1100 hours. Welcome to Alpha Squad.
Ready for the next chapter? We might see you there.